The sea had gone quiet after midnight. The waves usually sang against the stone wall outside the clinic, but that night they only breathed in shallow bursts. The building sat close enough to the harbor that salt lingered in the halls. The windows were streaked with years of wind and brine. Paint curled from the sills like brittle parchment. Dr. Evelyn Hart stood at the nurse's station, her shoulders stiff. The air smelled faintly of iodine and coffee left too long on a burner. She tapped the end of her pen against a clipboard that had already been checked twice. The night shift was slow. 2 elderly patients asleep in the main ward. A child with a stitched eyebrow dreaming in a corner bed. She told herself it would stay quiet. The phone rang. The sound jolted through the corridor, sharp, insistent. Evelyn lifted the receiver. A voice on the other end reported a transfer. Woman in her late 20s, smoke inhalation, possible fracture to the right shoulder. Conscious, but unsteady. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She straightened, nodded, gave instructions, then replaced the receiver with a firm click. The front doors rattled open a few minutes later. A gurney rolled in, wheels squeaking against the tiles. 2 volunteers pushed it forward, their jackets still marked with ash. The smell of burned plastic clung to them. Evelyn stepped forward, gloves already on. The patient lay half upright, coughing behind an oxygen mask. Her hair was chestnut, heavy with the dampness of sea air. A thin streak of soot ran down her temple. She looked exhausted, yet her gaze did not wander. Her eyes followed every movement around her, sharp despite the haze of fatigue. Evelyn leaned closer, voice steady. Claire Rivers, one of the volunteers, announced. Sound technician. She got people out before she fell. Claire tried to speak, but her chest seized into another cough. Evelyn adjusted the mask gently, checking the seal. The wheeze softened. She placed her stethoscope against Claire's back, listening for the rasp of inflamed lungs. It was there, faint but insistent, like paper being torn slowly. Shoulder, Evelyn asked. The volunteer nodded. She landed hard against a railing. She kept moving anyway. We couldn't stop her. Evelyn touched the swollen joint carefully. Claire winced, but held still. Beneath her skin the bone felt wrong. Not shattered, but not whole either. Bring her to Bay 2, Evelyn directed. Her voice carried command without volume. The gurney slid forward, metal frame squealing against the old floor. The clinic's trauma bay was small. A single overhead light buzzed when Evelyn switched it on. The walls were pale green, patched where plaster had cracked. She positioned herself on one side of the bed while a nurse adjusted monitors. Numbers flickered weakly on the screen. Oxygen saturation low, but not dangerous. Heart rate elevated. Evelyn began to work in practiced rhythm, questions threaded between checks. Do you feel dizzy? Claire's eyes met hers through the mask. She shook her head once, brief, controlled. Any pain when you breathe? Another small shake, though her ribs rose shallow, guarded. Tell me if it worsens, Evelyn said. She slipped in 4 into place, tape pressed against skin gone clammy with adrenaline. Claire did not flinch. She simply watched Evelyn's hands, as if the movement itself steadied her. The volunteers muttered about returning to the festival grounds. Their voices drifted toward the door. Evelyn heard them mention the blackout, the sudden crowd, the panic. The lighthouse had gone dark, its beam silenced by a failed circuit. Smoke rose from cables near the stage. People scattered toward the seawall. Evelyn glanced at Claire again. She pictured her in the chaos, trying to herd strangers to safety, lungs burning. You are safe now, Evelyn said. She checked the sling prepared by the nurse. The joint resisted, swollen against the fabric, but it would hold until imaging confirmed the injury. Claire's lips moved behind the mask. Evelyn leaned closer. The words were rough, almost a whisper. I had to stay until everyone was out. Her voice was dry, edged with resolve. Evelyn nodded. You did enough. Let us handle it now. The overhead bulb flickered suddenly, then died with a soft pop. The monitors blinked once and went dark. The building sighed into silence. A moment later, dim emergency lamps along the baseboards hummed to life, casting a low amber glow. Evelyn exhaled through her nose, steady. Power failures were common here. The generator would catch soon, but not instantly. She turned to the nurse. "Prepare the portable monitor. We will keep her in observation." The nurse moved quickly. Evelyn returned her focus to Claire. The patient's breathing had steadied with oxygen. Her skin carried the pale sheen of fatigue, but the panic had eased. Evelyn adjusted the mask once more, then stepped back. The quiet pressed in. Outside, a gull cried somewhere in the distance, disturbed by the sudden dark across the coast. The clinic seemed suspended, detached from time. Evelyn felt the stillness settle into her chest, heavy yet fragile. Margaret, the head nurse, appeared in the doorway. Her posture was brisk, her gaze precise. "Generator will take minutes. Move her to the family room. Less equipment to fail." Evelyn gave a curt nod. She signaled the porter, guiding the gurney out of the bay. The wheels rolled softly across the worn linoleum. The corridor lights were dead, only the strips near the floor still glowing. They turned a corner, arriving at a narrow door half hidden behind a cart of linens. Evelyn pushed it open. The family room was small. 2 chairs, a faded sofa, a quilt folded across the backrest. A single lamp powered by battery gave off faint yellow light. The air carried the faint musk of detergent and cedar from the wooden walls. Evelyn guided the gurney inside, adjusting it beside the sofa. She checked Claire's vitals again, documenting numbers by hand since the system was out. Her handwriting was precise, each digit lined neatly, as if control on paper could contain the chaos outside. Claire lay still, eyes closed now, though her fingers twitched slightly against the blanket. Evelyn watched the movement, the restless tremor of someone forcing calm. She recognized it. She had seen it in soldiers returned from drills, in children pulled from fires. The body remembered faster than reason. She pulled the quilt from the sofa, laid it gently across Claire's legs. Claire's eyes opened slowly. They were hazel, deep with fatigue yet steady when they met Evelyn's gaze. She adjusted the mask, speaking in a strained voice that carried through the hiss of oxygen. "Darkness makes it worse." Evelyn nodded once, not filling the silence with empty comfort. She sat in the chair beside the bed, pen poised above paper, though her attention lingered on the patient more than the chart. The generator thudded somewhere deep in the building. Lights along the corridor flickered back in hesitant rhythm. Evelyn allowed herself a slow breath. The night was far from over, but for now, they were holding. She glanced at Claire again, noticing small details she had missed earlier. The smudge of ash at her jawline. The calluses at the base of her fingers, proof of years adjusting wires and carrying equipment. A thin silver chain peeking from beneath her shirt collar. Each detail painted someone accustomed to work, not spectacle. Evelyn returned her gaze to the chart, forcing herself to keep her notes clinical. But the quiet room carried its own weight. And in that still space, with the hum of the generator finally smoothing into the walls, she knew this night would not be forgotten quickly. The family room closed around them like a shell. The corridor noises faded once the door clicked into place. The portable lamp gave off a dull amber glow, its beam falling across chipped furniture and the worn carpet beneath the bed. The air tasted faintly of dust and lemon polish, as though the space had been unused for weeks. Evelyn set the clipboard aside. She adjusted the oxygen flow, then folded her hands in her lap. Her shoulders were stiff from hours on duty, but she ignored the tension. Claire's breathing grew steadier, though each inhale still caught at the edges. Her eyes moved slowly over the room, taking in the faded curtains, the framed sketch of a fishing boat hung crooked on the wall. The silence lengthened. Evelyn felt the weight of it pressing on her, heavier than the stone walls of the clinic. She wanted to say something ordinary, a question about family or hometown, but the words refused to form. Claire stirred instead. She shifted slightly against the pillow. The fabric of the sling tugged across her shoulder and a faint tremor passed through her jaw. Evelyn noticed the motion. She leaned forward, careful not to let concern show as pity. She asked if the pain had worsened. Claire shook her head, but her lips tightened. Her gaze slid away toward the window. Through the glass, only blackness waited, a void where the sea stretched unseen. "I do not like the dark," Claire whispered. The mask muffled her voice, but the honesty carried through. Evelyn held her gaze. She gave no platitude. She only said, "It will not last forever." Claire's mouth curved, not quite into a smile, more into a fragile acknowledgement. Her hand twitched against the blanket. Then, slowly, she moved it toward the edge of the bed. She let it hover there, uncertain. Evelyn had left her own palm resting loosely on the arm of the chair. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Claire lowered her fingers onto Evelyn's hand. The touch was neither desperate nor accidental. It was deliberate, as if she had considered it in silence before deciding. Her skin was cool, roughened at the tips, the texture of someone accustomed to work with cables and gear. Evelyn did not pull away. She felt the weight of the choice, quiet but undeniable. She let her hand stay open, still, receiving rather than grasping. Claire's eyes flickered back to hers. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Outside the door, voices drifted faintly through the hall, reminders of the clinic beyond this small circle of lamplight. Yet the sound barely reached them. The room felt carved from another place, suspended outside the rush of duty and protocol. Evelyn told herself it was only temporary, a kindness offered to calm a frightened patient. But her chest betrayed her, tightening with something more complicated. Claire's grip eased, yet she did not withdraw. She seemed steadier with the contact, her breathing less shallow. Evelyn observed the change with the part of her mind trained to notice patterns, yet another part of her was caught in the strangeness of the intimacy. She thought of the rules drilled into her, the distance expected, the caution demanded by small towns where gossip traveled faster than ambulances. She could almost hear Margaret's voice in her head, cool and exacting. Still, Evelyn let the silence remain. She did not move her hand. She allowed the warmth of another person to anchor her, if only for the span of a few measured breaths. Claire spoke again, softer now. "I kept running back. I could not leave until I was certain, even when it hurt." Evelyn studied her face, the faint smudge of soot, the drawn lines of exhaustion. She answered quietly, "You did more than most would." Claire's eyes closed briefly as though weighing the words. When she opened them again, they carried a strange brightness, a steadiness born of fatigue and resolve entwined. The lamp flickered once, as if reminding them that the generator was not invincible. Evelyn straightened slightly, but the light held. Claire's fingers shifted against hers, brushing in a subtle rhythm, neither clinging nor retreating. Evelyn wondered if Claire realized how much that small gesture had unraveled her practiced composure. The door creaked. Evelyn drew her hand back swiftly, folding it against her lap. Margaret entered with the briskness of authority. She surveyed the room, eyes sharp in the dim light. Her expression gave nothing away, but Evelyn sensed the assessment. "Monitor her oxygen manually," Margaret instructed. "Keep her here until the system stabilizes. Imaging can wait until power is consistent. If anything worsens, call me." Her tone allowed no argument. She turned her gaze briefly toward Claire, then back to Evelyn, a silent reminder of responsibility. Then she left, the door closing with a soft click. The room seemed smaller afterward. Evelyn released the breath she had been holding. She glanced at Claire, who had shifted her hand back beneath the blanket, expression unreadable. For a moment neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of the oxygen mask. Claire broke the silence first. "She does not trust me." Evelyn replied, "She does not trust anyone easily." A faint curve touched Claire's mouth, half a smile, half resignation. "That makes two of you." Evelyn felt the words land deeper than intended. She masked it with a calm expression, returning to her notes, scribbling in the dim light. The numbers blurred slightly under her pen. She realized her hand trembled, though not from fatigue. Claire shifted again, wincing as her shoulder resisted the sling. Evelyn rose, adjusted the pillow to support the joint. Claire exhaled slowly, relief softening the tension in her face. She whispered a thank you. The sound carried more weight than its volume. Evelyn sat back down. She told herself to maintain distance. She reminded herself that compassion could become confusion when lines blurred. Yet the air in the room seemed charged with something unspoken, something neither entirely professional nor entirely forbidden. The lamp buzzed. The faint glow stretched shadows across the wall, making the two chairs loom larger than life. Evelyn found her gaze drifting toward Claire's features, tracing the angle of her cheekbone, the curve of her brow, the way fatigue and stubbornness coexisted in her expression. She caught herself, forced her eyes back to the chart. Claire's voice drew her back. You work at night often? Evelyn nodded. Almost always. Why? The question was simple, but Evelyn felt exposed by it. She answered carefully. The night asks for quiet. I prefer quiet. Claire considered this. She adjusted the mask briefly, then spoke. Silence is never empty. It always has layers. You just need to listen. Evelyn glanced at her, curiosity breaking through the walls she held. You listen for a living. Yes, Claire said. But it is more than that. I record moments. The hum of wires, the echo in old halls, even voices when they tremble. They're gone in seconds unless I capture them. Evelyn absorbed the words. She thought of her own nights, hours of monitoring, waiting, stitching, soothing, all vanishing into memory with no trace. The idea of holding them, even as sound, unsettled her. You carry those sounds with you? Evelyn asked. Always, Claire answered. Her good hand touched the pocket of her jacket where a small recorder rested. They remind me what happened was real. The remark lingered between them. Evelyn wondered what sounds from this room would remain. The hiss of oxygen, the buzz of the lamp, the faint scrape of pen on paper. She wondered if her own voice would be preserved somewhere inside that device. The thought unsettled her, yet it also drew her closer. She found herself leaning forward slightly, caught between curiosity and restraint. Claire noticed. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. Instead, she lowered her gaze to her hand, still hidden beneath the blanket. Evelyn followed the motion. She recalled the earlier touch, the deliberate choice. She felt its echo against her palm even now. She closed her hand loosely, as though holding the memory itself. The silence deepened, but it was no longer heavy. It was layered, textured, filled with unsaid recognition. Evelyn remained in the chair, chart forgotten. Claire rested her head back, eyelids heavy, yet her mouth curved faintly, almost at peace. Evelyn watched until her own eyes blurred. She reminded herself it was temporary, a night of duty. Yet she knew with clarity that the line between physician and stranger had already shifted. The quiet room had changed its meaning. When the corridor lights finally brightened, announcing the return of stable power, Evelyn did not move at once. She remained in the circle of lamplight, watching the rise and fall of Claire's breath, her own pulse steady yet altered. The night had not ended, but something else had begun, something she could not name without. Margaret returned just before dawn. Her shoes clicked against the floor, sharp in the hushed corridor. She carried a clipboard, her posture precise. When she entered the quiet room, Evelyn felt the temperature shift. Claire stirred against the pillow, adjusting the sling with her good hand. Margaret's gaze swept over both women before settling on the chart. The generator is stable now, she said, voice even, almost clipped. We can schedule imaging in the morning. Until then, monitor her manually. Do not leave her unattended. Her words were simple, but the pause between them carried weight. Evelyn knew it well. Margaret's sentences always carried more than the surface. They were reminders of standards, rules, consequences. Evelyn nodded, eyes steady, though a faint tension wound through her chest. Margaret remained a moment longer. Her eyes flicked from Claire to Evelyn and back, as if measuring distance, searching for fractures beyond bone. Then she turned, leaving without another word. The door closed softly. Silence returned, but it was no longer neutral. Claire exhaled through the mask, watching Evelyn. She thinks something. She always thinks something, Evelyn replied, her tone controlled. She lifted the stethoscope again, pressing it to Claire's chest, listening to the breath beneath the steady hiss of oxygen. The rhythm was steadier now, though shallow. Claire studied her quietly, the faint curve of a question in her eyes. Evelyn avoided it, focusing on the clinical details, documenting numbers, adjusting flow. Yet, she felt Claire's attention linger, as if trying to capture more than a reading. The hours thinned toward morning. The clinic grew restless again. A child cried briefly down the hall. A metal cart rolled past, rattling with instruments. The quiet room remained its own island, half apart from the rest. Evelyn stayed beside the bed, noting each shift in Claire's breathing, each adjustment of her sling. At last, when the patient drifted into sleep, Evelyn let herself lean back. She pressed fingers against her eyes, willing her mind into order. She thought of Margaret's gaze, sharp as a blade, and felt the weight of scrutiny that never quite left. She told herself it was only one night, only one patient, yet she sensed the truth was more complicated. Later, when the imaging technician arrived, the gurney squealed across the floor again. Evelyn walked beside it, steady hand guiding, eyes flicking to Claire's face. Claire endured the movement with quiet composure, though her jaw tightened when the sling shifted. The radiology suite was dim, its equipment humming faintly. Claire sat upright for the scan, shoulders tense. The machine clicked, capturing shadows of bone on film. Evelyn stood nearby, observing without intruding. When the image appeared, the fracture was clear, a thin line across the joint. Not catastrophic, but painful. Evelyn felt relief ease into her chest. She adjusted the sling with more confidence now. "You will heal," she said, voice calm, measured. Claire gave a faint nod, lips curving in something that might have been gratitude, or perhaps only acknowledgement of endurance. Back in the room, Evelyn prepared notes. Margaret returned again, standing near the doorway. She gave instructions without looking directly at either of them. She cannot be discharged today. Roads are blocked. Overflow in the staff dorms. Assign her to room 3. Dr. Hart, you will oversee her. The decision landed like a stone. Evelyn looked up sharply, searching Margaret's face. There was no explanation, only authority. Margaret's eyes held a flicker of something else, suspicion or test, Evelyn could not tell. "Yes," Evelyn said finally. Claire shifted, studying the exchange in silence. Her eyes traced Margaret's stance, then Evelyn's tightened shoulders. She seemed to sense the undercurrent, though she did not speak. When Margaret left, the air thickened again, filled with what could not be said. Evelyn gathered supplies. She guided Claire toward the small dormitory wing, a section rarely used for staff on call. The corridors smelled faintly of soap and damp stone. Room 3 waited at the end, a narrow space with 2 bunks pressed against opposite walls, a dresser leaning in one corner, paint peeling from the frame. Evelyn set a blanket on the lower bunk, adjusted the pillow, poured water into a chipped mug. Claire lowered herself carefully, grimacing as the sling pulled. She glanced around, eyes moving over the simple furniture, the curtain half drawn, the ceiling stained by old leaks. "This is unexpected," she murmured, voice low. Evelyn allowed a thin smile, brief as it came. "This clinic is full of surprises." Claire tilted her head, studying her. "You sound tired when you say that." "I am," Evelyn admitted. The words slipped out more easily than expected. Claire's mouth curved faintly. She rested back, cradling her shoulder. "You could leave. I can manage." Evelyn shook her head. "I need to check your vitals." "And if I said I am fine?" Claire asked, eyes glinting with quiet challenge. "Then I would not believe you," Evelyn replied, steadier now. The faintest laugh slipped from Claire, soft, almost private. It filled the room more than its volume allowed. Evelyn felt it settle into her, unexpected warmth against the clinical chill. The evening deepened outside. The dormitory windows showed no view of sea or harbor, only the dim reflection of lamplight. Evelyn sat at the edge of the opposite bunk, chart balanced on her knees. Claire shifted occasionally, testing the sling, grimacing then relaxing. The silence stretched, filled only by the scratch of pen on paper. At one point, Claire asked, "Do you always follow the rules?" Evelyn looked up, caught off guard. "Most of the time." "And when you do not?" "I pay for it," Evelyn said simply. Claire studied her for a long moment, then looked away. Her fingers toyed with the edge of the blanket, restless. Rules keep people safe, but sometimes they keep people away. Evelyn felt the truth of it strike her chest. She wrote another line on the chart, though the words blurred. She closed the folder abruptly. "Rest now," she said. Claire obeyed, lying back against the thin pillow. Her eyes closed slowly, lashes dark against pale skin. Evelyn sat still, listening to the faint rhythm of her breath, steady and human. She felt the urge to stand, to walk away, to place distance between them. Yet she remained seated, unmoving, caught in the quiet gravity of the room. Somewhere outside, a door slammed, echoing through the hall. The sound reminded Evelyn of Margaret's warning glance. People watched. People talked. She pressed her palms together, drew in a slow breath. When she looked back, Claire had not drifted to sleep. Her eyes opened again, steady. She whispered, "You do not have to hold everything alone." The words landed like a stone dropped into water, rippling through Evelyn's guarded silence. She said nothing, only held the gaze until it became too much. She rose then, adjusted the lamp, checked the 4-line. She forced her voice back into calm, reminding herself of distance, of duty. But when she left the room, she carried the echo of Claire's words with her, heavy as a secret. The corridor stretched ahead, dim, lined with closed doors. Evelyn walked slowly, her steps measured, her thoughts restless. She knew Margaret would continue to watch. She knew the town itself would watch, with eyes sharper than any supervisor. And yet, beneath that knowledge, another truth pulsed. The quiet room had already shifted the ground beneath her. The dorm would test it further. She paused at the end of the hall, resting her hand against the cold wall. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the pull inside her chest. She told herself it was exhaustion, nothing more. She told herself it would fade. Yet when she opened her eyes again, the memory of Claire's hand on hers returned, steady, deliberate. And she knew it would not fade so easily. The night pressed on. Evelyn returned to her rounds, checked on patients, noted charts, spoke to colleagues. She moved with precision, as if control could quiet the unease. But even as she worked, her mind circled back to room 3, where a sound engineer lay with a fractured shoulder and a voice that had already unsettled the careful order of her life. And somewhere, beneath all her restraint, Evelyn admitted what she had not allowed before. The boundary she had drawn between patient and physician, between self and other, was not as firm as she had believed. It had already begun to blur, and the more she fought it, the clearer it became. The dormitory hall settled into quiet after midnight. The clinic beyond it was still awake, but here the sounds thinned, as if the walls themselves muffled them. Evelyn sat on the lower bunk opposite Claire's. A lamp on the dresser gave off a pale glow, barely enough to soften the shadows. The room smelled faintly of laundry soap and the old varnish of the wooden frame. Claire lay back against the thin pillow, her injured arm cradled close. She shifted slowly, exhaling through her teeth. Then she reached into the pocket of her jacket with her free hand. Evelyn thought she meant to adjust the blanket, but Claire drew out a small object instead. It was a recorder, no larger than a hand. The plastic edges were scratched, the button worn down from use. Claire held it with a familiarity that looked like comfort. She pressed play. At first, the room filled with static, a broken hiss. Then a faint melody emerged, tangled with wind. A guitar somewhere distant. The notes bent, warped by interference, yet still haunting. Behind it the sea's voice whispered, uneven but persistent. Evelyn felt the sound settle into the room, as if the walls absorbed it. Claire watched her carefully. "I keep pieces of nights like this," she said. Her voice was low, almost apologetic. "Otherwise they vanish. I do not want them to vanish." Evelyn listened. She had spent years trying to forget sounds, not preserve them. The monitor alarm, the crack of metal in accidents, the ragged gasp of breath before silence. She looked at the recorder with unease, yet also with fascination. "Why share it now?" she asked. Claire's eyes softened. "Because silence here feels heavier than noise. And you look like someone who forgets to listen." Evelyn almost smiled, but stopped herself. She let the music play instead. The guitar faltered, strings buzzing under calloused hands. The wind roared briefly across the microphone, then fell back. It was imperfect, but its imperfection felt more real than the stillness of the dorm. Claire set the device on the blanket. "You collect lives in charts," she murmured. "I collect them in echoes." Evelyn leaned back against the wall, folding her arms. She wanted to dismiss the thought, but the idea stayed with her. Perhaps both of them were trying to hold what slipped away too easily. The lamp flickered once. Evelyn glanced at it, half expecting darkness again. But the light steadied. Claire tilted her head, watching her with quiet amusement. "You trust machines too much," she said. "I trust what I can control," Evelyn replied. "Control is fragile," Claire said softly. The words struck deeper than intended. Evelyn dropped her gaze. She focused on the steady rise of Claire's chest, the way her breath shaped the mask. The rhythm had improved since earlier, less strained, more even. That should have been enough. But her thoughts refused to stay clinical. The minutes passed. The recorder clicked off, leaving only the hum of the lamp. The absence of sound felt almost louder. Claire turned slightly, wincing, then settled again. She looked at Evelyn with a gaze that lingered. "You carry weight in your shoulders," Claire said. Evelyn gave a brief laugh without humor. "Everyone here does." "Not like you," Claire insisted. Evelyn looked away. She picked up the chart, wrote something meaningless, then closed it again. The silence grew taut. She wanted to escape it, yet also wanted to remain in it. Claire shifted again, the blanket sliding from her shoulder. She caught it clumsily with her free hand, but the motion was awkward. Evelyn stood, crossed the space, adjusted it. For a moment their faces were close. Evelyn felt the faint trace of smoke still clinging to Claire's hair, mixed with something sweeter, like fruit warmed too long. Claire leaned back, her mouth curving faintly. "Better company when you are not pretending to be made of stone." Evelyn hesitated, then sat down on the edge of Claire's bunk. She left space, but not much. Claire moved slightly, her head drifting until it rested against Evelyn's shoulder. The contact was light, almost tentative. Yet it carried intent. Evelyn froze. Every instinct urged distance. Every lecture, every rule, every reminder of Margaret's gaze pressed into her. But the warmth against her shoulder steadied her more than any discipline had ever done. She stayed still, her body taut, yet she did not pull away. Claire's breathing deepened. She seemed calmer now, eyelids heavier, lips relaxed. The weight of her head was slight, yet Evelyn felt it anchor her completely. The room seemed suspended in that moment. The lamp hummed. The corridor beyond had fallen into hush. Time itself felt reluctant to move. Evelyn stared at the opposite wall, tracing the cracks in the plaster, anything to keep her focus steady. Yet her awareness circled back always to the warmth at her side. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. The silence was no longer empty. It carried presence, layered and delicate. Evelyn found her chest easing despite the conflict inside her. She knew it was dangerous, knew it blurred lines, knew it would invite questions she could not answer. But still she remained, still she allowed it. Claire stirred slightly, whispering without lifting her head. "You stayed when you did not have to." Evelyn swallowed. "I had to." "No," Claire said, eyes closed now. "You chose to." The truth of it pierced through Evelyn's guard. She could not argue. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of the words sink. Then she opened them again, steadying herself with effort. Claire drifted into sleep, her breath slow, even. Evelyn sat unmoving, afraid that any shift would wake her. She studied the profile against her shoulder, the faint crease of exhaustion at the brow, the softness that came only when vigilance loosened. Her heart thudded harder than it should have. She told herself it was fatigue, that she had been awake too long. But she knew better. She knew the danger was not exhaustion, but recognition. The lamp flickered again. Evelyn looked up sharply. The light steadied, but the moment of fear remained. She thought of Margaret's warning, of how quickly rumors traveled, of how easily a single glance could be misread. She thought of consequences that reached beyond herself. Yet when she glanced down again, at Claire's head resting so lightly against her, those thoughts faded. She allowed the moment to hold her, fragile, temporary, but undeniably real. The hours slid forward. Outside, the harbor quieted, the night deepening into its slowest rhythm. Evelyn's body ached from stillness, yet she could not move. She watched the lamp's glow stretch shadows across the wall, watched dust float in the faint light. Finally, she eased herself back, careful not to wake Claire. She guided the blanket higher across the patient's chest, adjusted the sling gently, then rose. She paused, studying the sleeping figure once more. Then she turned, stepping softly toward the door. She closed it behind her, leaning against the frame for a moment. Her chest rose with a breath she had not realized she held. She pressed a hand to her temple, steadying herself. The corridor was empty. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked. She carried the image of Claire against her shoulder with her, carved into memory like a mark she could not erase. She knew she should resist it. She knew she should bury it. Yet, even as she told herself so, she recognized the futility. She returned to the station, forced herself into routine. She checked on other patients, reviewed files, signed forms. She moved through motions with precision, but her mind was elsewhere. Every task ended with the same image returning, persistent, undeniable. By the time dawn approached, she was still awake, chart in hand, pen scratching, though her thoughts were not on the words she wrote. They were on room 3, on the quiet recorder, on the weight of a head resting briefly against her shoulder, on the choice she had allowed herself to make without speaking it. And she knew that when the sun rose, nothing between them would be simple again. The morning came reluctantly. The sky outside the dormitory windows had turned pale, a thin veil of light spreading across the sea. Mist drifted between the rocks near the harbor, softening the edges of the world. Evelyn stood at the nurse's station, cup of coffee cooling beside her. She had not closed her eyes once. Every few minutes her gaze strayed down the corridor toward the door at the far end. The clinic was quieter now. Patients who had arrived during the night had been stabilized, some discharged, some still resting. The hum of the generator no longer seemed urgent, only background noise. A cleaner moved slowly through the hall, mop sliding in wide arcs. The rhythm of routine had returned. But for Evelyn the night had not dissolved. It clung to her like a shadow. When she finally walked back into room 3, Claire was awake. She sat against the headboard, her hair loose now, falling over her shoulders in uneven strands. Her sling rested against the pillow, awkward but necessary. She had drawn the curtain slightly, letting daylight creep into the narrow room. The light caught in her eyes, softening them. "The sea looks different in the morning," Claire said. Evelyn followed her gaze. Through the glass, the water shimmered, silver against the rising sun. Fishing boats drifted near the horizon, their outlines blurred by mist. The lighthouse stood still, its beam extinguished, silent after the chaos of the night. "Everything looks different in the morning," Evelyn answered. Claire smiled faintly. "Not everything." Evelyn checked the chart, her voice professional again. "Breathing is steady. No fever. You can be discharged once the roads are clear." Claire adjusted her sling with her free hand. "So I am your responsibility only for a few more hours." "That is all," Evelyn replied. The words were steady, but her chest tightened as she said them. The morning stretched onward. Volunteers from the festival arrived, carrying supplies, checking on injuries. Laughter and chatter filled the corridor, as though the night had been only a brief interruption. Evelyn felt the difference in herself, though. What had shifted inside her was not erased by daylight. By noon, Margaret appeared at the station with a file in hand. Her tone was brisk. "Roads are clear. Ferries are running. Discharge her this afternoon." Evelyn nodded. She felt Margaret's eyes linger a moment, sharp and knowing, then move on. She carried the file to room 3. Claire was already dressed, jacket zipped awkwardly over the sling. She stood by the window, gazing out at the sea. "Your papers are ready," Evelyn said quietly. Claire turned, her expression calm. "So soon?" Evelyn placed the file on the dresser. She hesitated, then reached for the blanket to fold it. Her hands were steady, though her thoughts were not. Claire stepped closer. "I have something for you," she said. She pulled an object from her pocket. A pair of old earbuds, wires tangled, casing scratched. She pressed them into Evelyn's hand. "What is this?" Evelyn asked. "Listen," Claire said. "Not now, but later. It holds last night. A recording. The sound of waves. My voice. A reminder that you are not alone." Evelyn stared at the earbuds. She felt the weight of the gift, not in ounces but in meaning. She closed her fingers around them, unable to answer at first. Claire watched her, patient, waiting. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "You should keep it." "I already have too many," Claire replied. Her smile was quiet, almost tender. "You need this one more than I do." Silence pressed in, full of everything unsaid. Evelyn felt the walls of the dorm room fade until only the two of them remained. She wanted to speak, to confess what had shifted in her, but the words would not come. She lifted her head instead. Claire stepped closer, close enough that Evelyn felt the warmth of her breath. Then, without hesitation, Claire leaned forward. She touched her forehead lightly to Evelyn's. It was not a kiss, not a demand, only a brief joining. A gesture of recognition, quiet and deliberate. Evelyn closed her eyes. She let the contact linger, her pulse quickening. Then Claire drew back, her smile faint but resolute. The moment broke when voices filled the corridor. Volunteers had arrived to collect her. They called her name, cheerful, unaware. Claire straightened, pulling her jacket tighter. She glanced once more at Evelyn. "It is time," she said. Evelyn nodded. Her throat felt dry. She picked up the file, handed it over, watched as Claire signed the last page with careful strokes. They walked together down the hall. The volunteers gathered around Claire, fussing over her sling, offering to carry her bag. She answered them with polite amusement. Evelyn followed a step behind, silent. At the entrance, the group paused. The sea wind rushed in through the open door, carrying the scent of salt and kelp. Outside, the ferry waited at the dock, engine idling, passengers boarding. Claire turned back to Evelyn. Her eyes searched hers one final time. "Do I leave this here?" she asked softly. Evelyn tightened her grip on the earbuds still hidden in her hand. She swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "No. Take it with you. Just remember where it began." Claire's smile deepened, fragile yet firm. "I will not forget." She stepped onto the path, the volunteers surrounding her. Evelyn stood at the threshold, watching as Claire moved farther away. The hum of the ferry carried across the water, steady, insistent. Claire climbed the ramp, paused once, looked back. Evelyn lifted her chin in the faintest acknowledgement. Then Claire disappeared into the crowd. The ferry pulled away, slicing across the gray water. The mist thickened, swallowing the boat until only its echo remained. Evelyn stood still, her coat pressed against her body by the sea wind. When she turned back inside, the clinic was alive again with its rhythm. Nurses moved briskly, patients asked questions, Margaret gave orders. Evelyn joined the motion, her steps measured, her hands steady. Yet inside her something had changed. She returned to the station, opened a chart, began writing. But her mind drifted to the earbuds in her pocket. She felt their weight against the fabric, heavier than any instrument she had carried before. That evening, after her shift ended, she walked the path along the harbor. The sky had cleared, stars scattered above the black water. The lighthouse stood silent, its light still dormant. She sat on the stone wall, the earbuds tangled in her fingers. She pressed play. The sound began with static. Then came the rush of waves, uneven, alive. Behind it, Claire's voice, low, steady. Last night, I was not alone. Evelyn closed her eyes. She listened. The water lapped against the rocks. The voice lingered, soft yet firm. She felt the truth of it echo inside her, reaching places she had sealed long ago. She sat there for a long time, the sea stretching infinite before her. She did not know if she would ever see Claire again. She did not know if what had passed would survive the distance. But she knew this much. She had stopped pretending. She no longer denied the want that had been awakened. The night pressed close, calm now, no chaos, no alarms. Evelyn breathed slowly, the sound of the recording still in her ears. The sea listened to, endless, patient. And in that stillness, she understood. Some choices are quiet. Some leave no scars, only echoes. But echoes are enough to change everything. Thank you for staying until the very end of today's story. What began as a night in a small clinic by the sea became something much more, a quiet reminder that even in the most ordinary places, connection can arrive when you least expect it. Evelyn and Claire met as doctor and patient, yet the line between them blurred into something tender, something worth remembering. If this story spoke to you, share in the comments what moment stayed with you the most. Was it the sound of the recorder, the weight of a hand resting in silence, or the choice that lingered long after morning came? Your reflections mean more than you know. Make sure you are subscribed to She and SG, where every day we bring you intimate tales of women whose paths cross in unexpected ways. Here, love is told in whispers, in small gestures, in the kind of moments that leave echoes. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Until tomorrow, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and remember, every story begins with a single touch. This is She and SHE.